things were going great. My glucose averages were trending down and my energy was up. And then I got sick. And here's what happened and why I didn't panic this time and why you shouldn't either. Welcome back. It's been a while since I've shared a health update with you. And a few episodes ago, I shared how I went from my glucose averages in the low 100s going to the 80s. And I was pretty excited about that. My little teeny tiny habit of adding a little interval training into my walk was finally showing some results, and it was really encouraging. And I was starting to think, okay, let me add some other movement because, I'm going to be training for a hiking trip that we're taking in about 3 months. So I was getting really excited about ramping it up a little bit. Well, I got sick and I'm pretty sure I caught it on the plane when I was heading back home from California. But, honestly, I could have caught it from anywhere and, it doesn't really matter. What matters is it really sidelined me. And here's what happened. So after I got back from my trip, my Aura ring, actually, this little ring right here, when I first got home, it did give me some notifications that it was like, hey, your temp is a little higher than normal. So it wasn't a lot. It was like maybe like 0.3 or 0.5 or something. It was trending up. And my sleep was a little bit off. The weather was much different here in the Northeast than it was in California. And I was a little jet lagged. So I was paying attention to my Aura ring, but really not thinking too much of it. I still felt pretty good, so I was kind of like going about my day, trying to get back into the swing of things. And then whammo, the 4th day home, I just started feeling like super tired and I woke up feeling a little chilled, tired, and just not myself. Eventually, a couple of days later, I did test to make sure it wasn't COVID, but it wasn't. And it was just really a bad cold. I had a bit of sinus pressure and I started to develop this awful cough, which, by the way, was only showing up at night when I was trying to sleep. During the day, I might cough a little bit, but it wasn't really a lot. It wasn't producing anything either. It was just a little tickle in the back of my throat. And I did have a little bit of a sore throat, but super minor. But the cough was probably the worst thing because, like I said, during the day I was feeling fine. But at night, it would just, oh my gosh, it would come on strong. And basically, it really messed with my sleep. And yeah, it was awful. I was not sleeping at all. And as it was developing, I noticed that my glucose levels was also starting to increase back to the levels where it was before it had started to come down into the 80s. And I have to say that I really was starting to feel discouraged and starting to do that blame game, starting to blame myself. Oh, I should have been more careful while I was on the plane, all that work to get it down, and now it's back up. Why is this happening to me? Basically like, woe is me, wah, wah, wah. But you all know I have this habit, and it's right here, the woe habit, that stops negative talk in its tracks. And of course, I'm going to remind myself, I just had to say, whoa. That feeling, what is that feeling? Well, I'm feeling like it's all my fault. And is it true? Well, no, it's really not true. I know that in order to see progress, even when I'm sick, I own that progress. And I should not just expect everything to work out the way it is because that's just not how life is. So the one thing that I knew that I could do was prioritize sleep because I was sick, and sleep is the best thing for when you're not feeling well because it's when we recover the most. So I focused on getting sleep. And I knew that as I'm able to assess and adjust based on like how I was feeling each day. So I reminded myself, I just said, whoa, this is not your fault. You're sick. That's all it is. And you're going to get through it. And this woe habit, which I now have a sweatshirt that says it, this woe habit really works, really, for a lot of scenarios.
I wanted to make sure I added here is that when you are not feeling well, your glucose levels will generally go up. Your body is putting out these hormones to fight this infection. Even blaming myself for higher glucose, yeah, if I was eating like Pringles all the time, all day long, or just eating spoonfuls of sugar, then yeah, maybe I am to blame. But that is not the case here. It is normal for our glucose to increase while we are fighting some sort of infection. So really, there's no reason to blame yourself.
Well, it took me about 3 weeks to get to start feeling like 95% of myself. And this last week, I finally got back to working out with my personal trainer and doing my daily walks. And on days when I felt good, probably about a week and a half after my symptoms started, I was able to go out and get my walking in place. I really didn't put a lot of stress on myself. My goal was to get the daily walk in and not overdo it because I wanted to just make sure I started to feel better. For the last 3 weeks, I've also tried to eat low carb. I did have nachos. That's like one of my vices is like I love nachos from our local taco place. And so I did have it a couple of times. I was feeling down and kind of gave in, but usually most of the time I really kept with my usual eating habits. And this stuff happens and I was good most of the time. But slowly but surely, and as of this recording, it looks like my average will be just under 100 for this last week. So that's trending in the right direction. And you know what? I'm going to take it. It's all good. The last few weeks have been high and now it's coming back down. And I know sometimes data like this can be super, super stressful, especially if you're just starting to track and measure. But don't give up. Having this data is so useful to help you make some decisions on where to focus your efforts. It's not meant to be there so you can be harder on yourself. Give yourself some grace and be patient. You want to track and measure, and we are all human after all. We're not perfect. We're going to make progress, and even if it's slow progress, it's good progress. So if you're tracking your health and you feel like you're sort of hitting a setback, just make sure to keep going. The tools help, but your mindset matters more. If you want to know the tools that I use to track things like glucose, sleep, and stress, I'm sharing those in my next episode, and I've listed them all in the show notes and description. And I've also got a link to my habit tracker that has a lot of extra details that I'm sharing here in the show about how I'm feeling about my glucose levels at the time that I'm looking at the level and the numbers. So make sure to check that out. And if you're tracking your health and you hit a setback, just don't give up. It's not failure, it's feedback. And we're all human. Give yourself some grace. Look, I had nachos twice and I didn't work out for weeks, but I also walked, I rested, I stayed consistent most of the time. I tried to prioritize sleep, and that's what I'm celebrating because that's what progress looks like. It's all those little things that make a big difference. Now, my glucose averages are finally coming back down. This is Effie in progress, experimenting, seeing what works and what doesn't, one tiny habit at a time. And I hope to see you in the next one.